Somebody's falling off the stage. The microphone, please. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for still being with us after such a long session of presentations. I hope you enjoyed the coffee and had a good conversation in amongst us. We are now coming back with a panel, and the panel is actually, set to bring closer the discussion of resilience in the middle of society by having a focus on the communities. It runs under the slightly clunky title of Co-Creating Resilient Communities with Citizens at the Center of Decision-Making in Disaster Risk Management. I would like to take the opportunity before handing over to Philippe as the moderator of the panel to thank our partners from the CMIND platform, which had been the initiators of forming clusters at DRS01, pushing the agenda and showing us the need of cooperation. I think it went really well, and I think it should be an example for following projects to come. With this, I'd like to turn over to the moderator, Philippe. Philippe,
thank you very much. Well, it's quite new to be moderating, you know, such a distinguished assembly. So I'm very happy to be with you to do this. There will be a series of questions that will be posed to different project representatives, but it does not hamper some reactions from you if you wish. So if you need to have a reaction, a question, whatever, a comment, just raise your hand and we'll give you a microphone, knowing that we'll have a relatively small time for this, because while we are a little bit late, not too late actually, so it's quite surprising. We are supposed to have lunch, because this is quite an essential feature, lunch, at 12:30. But if we are a little bit late, it will be all right. So we have basically 1 hour. So my role here is to address some specific questions to the different panelists, and I will start with Residoc, so Katia from the Slovenian Civil Protection Agency, and I would like to. You don't have. I'm not Katia. You are not Katia? Are you a kid, Kati? Yes. But what? Oh, you know, my fish is like the journalist. Oh gosh. She's here.
Yes.
Where are you, Katia?
Yeah, I'm on the video. I mean, but I'm not on the panel behind.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. It sounds like a sixth dimension. You know, where are you, Roshtlak? This is quite impressive. Okay, so
yeah.
So Katia, so I will pose you a question, if I may, on the local community cities. How do they ensure, these local community cities, that all components that are relevant to resilience are identified and addressed coherently?
You mean within the Resiloc project?
Yes, exactly.
I
guess. It's within the Resiloc program.
So this was quite a challenge for our project, and that's why we organized so-called local resilience teams, where we gathered different stakeholders, not only civil protection as a dedicated one, but also others which are very important in the building the resilience of the local community. And this turned out to be a very good approach, and with the bottom-up approach, starting from the local resilience, from local communities, local resilience, we actually can get up to the, to national and up to the, global level, and to somehow contribute to the implementation of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, if you have any reaction to that, just jump on your chair and you will be listened. So, well, thank you, Katia. In fact, there is another question which is here. For me, the response is quite obvious, but you will confirm. To what extent can a resilience strategy be developed in silos at local level? I don't think it's the case, but you will confirm that this, please.
You mean separately from others?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, at local level.
At local level, from my experience as a civil protection girl for 25 years, the resilience can be the resilience at local level. Anyway, it's a multi-stakeholder project, multi-stakeholder task. So, building resilience is the responsibility of whole society.
Okay, thank you. And the project is aiming to have an operational tool, strategic operational tool. Do you think it will be uptaken and useful for decision-making process in local communities? How do you envisage this?
You mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tool is made for building resilience in local societies, and yeah, it will definitely contribute in a systematic level with all the dimensions, indicators, and proxies to, let's say, more systematic approach to the resilience in local communities. But from my experiences with Resilog, for being here for, let's say, 2 years and a half, I think, this tool is also, or would be also usable for higher levels of building resilience in the society.
Thank you, Katia. We very much look forward to that, and we will have, in fact, some updates regularly by Resilog in future meetings. Thank you very much. And again, well, if you want to intervene, have questions, don't hesitate. So now I'm turning to Katy, and it's about
Okay.
It's about builders, and I would like to ask, in fact, what are some of the disregarded vulnerability factors, unexpected sources of resilience that were revealed in your research? And this includes, in fact, homeless groups that you considered in builders.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. So my name is Alexandra Olsen, and I actually represent the Salvation Army's network in Europe. So there are really so many interesting factors, but I'll try to just touch on a few. One of the interesting ones is we found that migration status really shaped experiences of the pandemic. In terms of being able to access social benefits, as we found within our data that there were very high levels of impacts on access to food, shelter, and income, as well as mental health outcomes. And so one of the mitigating factors was having access to social benefits, but obviously if you are undocumented, you may not have, well, you don't have the same access to those sorts of benefits. We also found that the COVID-19 pandemic was very much a psychological disaster, as much as it impacted, access to food and shelter and things like that. And what was very interesting about this is we found within our respondents that if there was experiences to previous exposure to previous hazards, the mental distress as a result of the pandemic was actually exacerbated. And in regard to sources of resilience, as Kati said in her presentation, social workers were actually considered very important sources of information by socially marginalized people. And this shaped their experiences and their ability to cope with the pandemic as well.
Thank you. So, in fact, in the light of what you are saying, do you think that these crisis experiences of the care organization facilitate the, I would say, the intermediate, the interactions between the most vulnerable people and the management authorities, the disaster management authorities? Yes,
in that regard, practitioners of social care organizations were very important intermediaries in this way. They have these day-to-day experiences with vulnerable people, so they know their needs, they know how the pandemic is impacting them, so they know how to advocate if their needs are not being met by disaster management. They are also were very important in transferring information that was given by local authorities and national authorities and kind of translating that in a way that their clients could best understand. And we also found that they were, social workers were very good at combating misinformation as well.
Okay. Thank you. Katy, you want to get? There is, in fact, another question, maybe you will be able to respond to it. What helps or hinders care organizations functioning in provision of support during crisis?
Yes, I can add to Alexandra's interference as well. I think what really has helped these care organizations or social services altogether is dependent on the extent to which they are aligned with the authorities. And since the first responders and the official responders to the crisis situation are often sort of intact, maybe from these social service workers, or they are considered as separate, maybe dealing only with the consequences in the long run, consequences of the crisis in the long run. But we saw that those organizations and in those countries' systems where the disaster management is by nature more aligned with also the local social services, in these systems, the linkage between the authorities and social care organizations worked much better. The information flows were much easier going on. Also, the material needs were addressed in a more quicker way. So I'm referring here to actually a very interesting divide between the Eastern European countries, where the care organizations, we are talking about NGO care organizations that are normally in most of the Europe funded by donations, very much kind of civil organizations, civil society supported organizations. Whereas in Eastern European, particularly we looked into Estonia and Lithuania, these care organizations are very much still aligned with the local authorities, and in this way, this natural linkage between the care and the authorities is worked very well and served well during the disasters as well, in order to bring the needs of our clients to the authorities, and likewise the sort of the information about the restrictions, information about vaccinations, for example, in the COVID context, bringing this knowledge back to our clients. So in this way, this dialogue seems to be working better in some of the countries where this has been naturally, historically built up like that.
Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. And in fact, it brings us also to the challenge of bringing this type of community, which is working at international level, with providing recommendation, expertise, and so on, down to the local level. And we have seen that in some occasions, there are research outputs that enable, for example, to have impact forecasting for disasters like flash flood. It happens last summer in Belgium, Germany, and Luxembourg, where data were available one day before and were communicated by the research community, but was not taken up by the local communities. And this problem of governance and transfer of information is crucial because, as you say, actions will be locally. This is absolutely sure. But if the local communities and authorities do not have the sufficient expertise to better assess and evaluate the risk, then well, I don't want to say that in meaningless, but we have a clear problem of governance. So thank you very much for this. We will be continuing with, I'm disturbed, because Michael is here and you are here, and you are supposed in my fiche to speak first. They are challenging the moderator. So Francesco, this is for you. So on links projects. So social media and crowdsourcing show promise for creating more inclusive approaches in disaster management processes. But what are the key considerations that are needed to be made for integrated citizens and vulnerable groups in these processes? The floor is yours.
Very difficult question,
yeah, I
Philip.
know that, yeah. It's not me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say very few things, simple things. I hope I can contribute to this very rich discussion. I just want to say, to start with, that in links, we are looking at some of the themes that were discussed and presented in the morning, like how can we be more inclusive, how can we define better the concept of vulnerability and diversity. And these are very difficult things to do in terms to really catch and frame. But what we think is that to have a journey that is more inclusive, we definitely need to embrace diversity as an added value. And to do that, we need to create processes that allow true participation of users, of our beneficiaries, that create the environment for them to truly participate and see the outcomes of their participation. We have designed in Links a model called the social vulnerability model, very difficult, but it analyzes some of the key dimensions that we work on the project, like access to places, access to information, connectivity to other networks, how do we mobilize goods, how do we mobilize resources. And when it comes to social media, I think social media can be a great vehicle to reduce barriers, but of course they also have challenges. And so we look at what are the risks of all these. Social media can create platform to information that are not reliable, information that are fake. Social media can marginalize more groups that are already marginalized. Social media can create conflict between what people do to help in an emergency and what the relevant authorities are doing to respond to that emergencies. So we look at all these interaction, and one of our main target is, of course, young people, children, because we know that already from 6 years, half of the children are digitally literate. They use social media. So I think they can play a very important role in building societies that are more resilient and in making the difference.
Do you have a concrete example on how it may actually directly contribute to local resilience?
Well, I can mention a couple of things we are doing in Links. We are building a platform, a web platform, that we want to contain resources for what we call the whole education community. And these resources are meant to engage especially adolescents and pre-adolescents in disaster risk reduction with the use of social media and crowdsourcing. I can bring a few examples that we have already tested. We are working with partner schools to support children in creating their own digital communication campaign on risks that are concerning their own community they live in. We are working with them to use crowd mapping applications to identify obstacles to, reaching, accessing safe areas, gathering spots for evacuation, and to help them to gather this information and to make them useful to their community by engaging with this information the local authorities to see what can be solved. And another example is to bring together having an intergenerational approach. Because as I said before, children can really make a difference, and they can take the leading role of helping, for instance, elderly people on how to check, very simply, information online, how to distinguish between reliable information and what it isn't.
Thank you very much, Francesco. We will be moving ahead. I'm completely terrified because I see that there are people for which I do not have any fish, for Paolo, Marie-Christine, and so. But I will adapt. But
this court didn't. They answer to all questions. They have no specified questions.
Okay, so I will give you the floor and you will say what you want. So
But then I think you have skipped the engagement.
No, it will come. In fact, it's due to the positioning. I'm very strategically looking at the fish and the positioning. So now I'm moving to Michael, for the Engage project. And I will ask you, Michael, what role do you think public alerting message systems can play today in societal resilience?
Well, you can hear me? Yeah. Well, today I think there's a fundamental thing we need to talk about first, because public alerting and public warning, in my perspective, is many things. You know, it is about getting the message to the public in the best way possible, and there's many tools today that try to achieve that. And without having efficient tools that cover the entire population, we aren't able to create societal resilience, because people need to get informed to be able to take action. I mean, that's how easy it is. So today, our phones, our devices are our life. It's my life, unfortunately. My wife tells me about it all the time, but it is the case. Our devices are one of the things that we use the most. And today, there are technologies that allow us to communicate to millions in seconds through those devices. Now, we have apps and so on. The issues with that, you know, is you need to be able to get the message to everybody. Apps need to be downloaded. So some of these technologies that are there today, you know, allow masses of information to go to masses of people in seconds. My point of this is, to go back to the resilience part, is that my experience working with emergency services for many, many years is when something happens at a 112 central, a crisis center, an event, it becomes very chaotic. All the information comes in, people are seeking information, newspapers, public, people are affected, will call in and ask to get informed, right? That's a big issue, and that makes the whole scene in that center very, very chaotic. However, what's been really, really interesting to see, and something I would like research to actually prove later on, is being able to send messages to the masses, localize what's happening, be able to press the button quickly and disseminate that message, actually creates an enormous effect of everything quieting down. Because we as individuals, I was actually thinking of the risk pack presentation earlier, which was really interesting. We as individuals, if we get informed, we understand the situation, then we can act on it. However, if we don't have any information, we will try to seek it, right? We will panic and we will try to call the emergency services and so on. So being able to disseminate that information to the masses will by itself create societal resilience. People will be able to act positively on that. And not only that, I mean, we're doing this to save lives. That's the purpose of public warning systems, is to save lives. But actually, it's got a huge financial impact. Loss and damages, being able to communicate out means that people are, actually to your point about Germany, there was in Norway many years ago a flooding that was, you know, something we knew was going to happen days in advance or a day in advance. Being able to communicate that to that public actually meant that they could get home, they could empty their cellars, they could take all their valuables, things that can't be replaced, photo albums, things away from those cellars, and make sure that, you know, there's a huge loss that was prevented, which is financial for governments, it's financial for insurance companies, and the cost of putting in place public warning systems for social resilience is just a fraction of one of those events. So it's sorry, I get carried away.
It's interesting. It's interesting because, but in fact, what is also crucial is related to education and risk perception. Yeah. Because if you don't have people who are actually educated to understand better the risk, you can have any kind of measures being taken. They will maybe not believe them, and Correct. They will not act. It's a problem. We see that in all the type of disasters.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you another question about the opportunities and challenges in emerging organizations or the population relatively to the use of advanced communication technologies? So what are the...
well, I'm actually going to get my help from my colleague Cohen. But before that, can I just answer you on the terms of the information? Because that's right. We need to have a standardized way of doing public alerting across borders. Everybody needs to get the same information or be used to the same information from the same place. So, and then knowing how to act to it. So having places to search, gather information is really, really important. And what Cohen's going to talk a little bit about, hopefully, is our, you know, the Engage Project's chatbot, which is one way of filtering that information away. So I'm just going to leave it to Cohen.
So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So, as you said also about the reliable information, Francesco talked also about it. The trust is really at the center of all these advanced technologies. So trust of the public in the technologies, trust of emergency organizations in the technologies, and that makes also opportunities to integrate as many trustworthy and authoritative sources into these technologies, such as the chatbot, but also really at the core. So making the data sets, integrating those sources into the data sets to make sure the trust is at the core of every solution that we make. And then, of course, one of the biggest opportunities that we want to tackle with Engage is really the resources which are caught up during emergencies. So active crisis in which so much is going on that every call center is completely overloaded. And especially in those situations, those technologies like chatbots can really help alleviate these issues and make sure the public is informed and therefore can contribute to societal resilience and make our emergency organizations more efficient. Yeah, one of the last points is, of course, like you talked about, for example, on the flash floods in Belgium and Luxembourg, which is the local level, and the local communities which aren't always in line, and this fragmentation, like organizational fragmentation from national to local level, national to municipal level, that's one of the big challenges also, which these technologies need to tackle first before.
Thank you very much. Allow me a comment on the problem of advanced technologies. Actually, there is a kind of breach of generations in this aspect. You spoke about the young people who are used to really adapt very quickly to these technologies. I'm an IT dinosaur, typically. If you tell me to use advanced technologies, I will look at you with eyes of a dead carp, you know, because I've not been trained. My 2 kids, they will do it very quickly. But the problem is that a lot of emergency organizations which are locally acting now are not youngsters. They are not people of 20, 25 years old. They are very often people who are not necessarily trained for that. So there is certainly a gap to be looked at, which is this training issue and bringing people up to the use of advanced technologies. Otherwise, we will create a monster. We will create a kind of gap of generation before the young people who are used to the advanced technologies will be able to use them when they will be working specifically in the field, which is not yet the case. But this is a side comment. I see two reactions. Horst, you have been the first. It's like selling your marketplace.
Thank you very much, and I especially appreciate Michael's presentation or so on. Nevertheless, I think we should think about an extension. It's not only the technology. The technology is important, is infrastructure, but what is really in bad state is the content. And I tell you from the German experience, we are working with quite a lot of people. There are parliamentary investigation committees in 2 federal states dealing exactly with this for months, exactly for these things. And we are looking for the documentation later. But the communication is to be addressed to each of the affected people, handicapped people, homeless people, and whatsoever. In Germany, there was, in the first 2 hours, 11 handicapped people drowned, dead, in the first hours. An event that was announced 4 days before and reconfirmed in severity all the following days. Nevertheless, these people have to drown. There were people that said no one would have to be drowned if the organization was really. And it's not only about technique, it's exactly about content. And we are looking for comparison of international best practice, not only in Europe, but also in the United States. They are much better in content of alerting.
Thank you very much, Horst. I think that there is an issue also that people do not believe because it is a rare event. Now there are a lot of people who still do not believe in climate change impact. And typically this type of events that occurred last summer is in fact the same type of events that we see in the Mediterranean area and the southeast of France, which is coming north. But people do not believe that when we heard in Belgium that it will rain, people say, in Belgium it rains. It rains, So yeah, there is another question. We will be you have squeezed, in fact, this gentleman. But just pose your question and then you will.
The question will be short, but all the time I don't fully understand this advanced communication technology. It is about the communication technology itself, or it is about better, more comprehensive data sets that are prepared and transferred via this technology? Because I understood from that the center of gravity is rather in data sets than communication technology itself, but maybe I misunderstood something.
Can I comment to these? Okay, I'll comment to yours first, and I'll comment to Horst afterwards because he's got a really good point actually. Let's just talk about there's no need for new technologies in terms of dissemination of messages. Today, we are extremely advanced in the world on technologies that are available for public warning, and they are extremely efficient. So they need to be adopted. That's more of there's no innovation needed in that extent. So there's an issue of adopting and understanding. Horst, to your point, I'll get to that. And in terms of the data sets, is about how can you help the public be resilient in terms of finding answers themselves. And this is the point of the data sets, is creating this, what the Gauge project is doing, in essence, is creating a artificial intelligence using ML to create a chatbot where you can ask questions so that lots of the incoming information to the emergency centers is filtered away because they're standard questions. They have worries that can be addressed without a person at the call center needing to take that, because they might have a pregnant lady that is about to give birth that they need to help. In an emergency, there's so many questions that can be dealt with technology, and by that you need data sets. You need to be building that kind of system.
Yeah, it's adoption. It's more implementation. It's more
okay. Well, can I go just
very quick, because there is another question, and then we have to move ahead. Yeah.
To Horst's question, again, technologies are there. What I think we need in Europe, and actually from today's learning for me, it was a really nice day today because I learned from everybody here about the different projects. I think what research should be utilized for now is about how to create common operating procedures for governments or for users of these systems, because it will breach the gap between knowledge. It's the people receiving the messages, they don't need to know about technology, they will receive the message. But the users need to know how to respond quickly, efficiently, with the right kind of information at the right time. I think that's really by core here, is for future projects, maybe we should spend more time in researching how common procedures can be put in place for many countries to respond.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. Very quick question, please, because we are...
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you all, and especially who speaks before and who speaks later. Just I want to highlight some points. First of all, the trust. If we have the information, from where we can trust, because we have from many, many different places, and you can see also in the social media, now you have for one news, let's say, we have different type of this scam. This is the first thing. The second thing, it must be somewhere to exchange the data or exchange the information. And we have to trust this information. And I think it's better when we have a special organization somewhere who can have this information, evaluate it, and then it can publish it for the public in any case, by radio, by internet. But this organization or this place is in the people are trust. The last thing I'm talking about the children. Yes, the children can do more than us. Definitely more. But who can trust these children? And is the children understand what is this information? What is the reaction of this information? This is also another important thing. We can give the children the telephone, he can take all the information. We have telephones now in our age. We just hello, and maximum WhatsApp. That's all for our age. The last thing, I just remember a long time ago, when we have a disaster, let's say, there was warning in a very old type things. Let's say it's raining in somewhere. The people who are in the mountain, they just shoot. That the other people in the valley down, they knows that a lot of water come in this valley. Then they go away. It's very old version, but also works. Now we have to find a solution which is reasonable, trustable, that people can do whatever, the right reaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is, yeah, well, we need to move the tasks. Yeah.
Very concise. Yeah, very concise. One very important aspect is also what is the trust that the citizens have towards the government and to the authorities that are issuing these alerts, because we saw in Greece in previous years the authorities issuing evacuation, for example, requests, and people were trying to do the heroes, or they wouldn't believe, or they would follow different conspiracy theories or whatever. So there needs to be also some work on the psychology of the society and how they will work with the government towards resilience.
Thank you. Well, we will not enter into this debate because it will be a long debate. The pandemics is a very nice example of that, what you are just saying. Who is evaluating the authorities which are providing information? It's a single channel. So we receive information, but who is evaluating this? And for the pandemic, I was amazed to see that very often it was a unique scientific discourse. And I would have liked, as a scientist, to have some more contradictory views put on the table publicly, so that people indeed understand we have to discuss that. We are all adults. And very often we have in single discourse, and we do not have any authorities back to evaluate that it is the right advice. So it is a little bit tricky. And for the children, I think that they understand much more than what we think. And well, Maureen could tell. She had a project called Quidar, which was very interesting in this respect. Embraced. It was not. Oh, shame on me. No, and it shows actually this kind of effect. It gives me a nice way to turn to you, Maureen, and to pose you some question about the risk perception, because I think it's quite important. How can you explain the difference in risk perception that we see sometimes between civil protection authorities and citizens in the hazard-prone locations?
Thank you, Philippe. And in fact, it connects with several of the questions from the floor and the responses from the floor, I think, because what we're starting to see in the questions that are coming through is this realization that when we talk about a risk perception gap, often people are thinking the gap lies with the citizens. And the problem is that we have to educate them, we have to inform them, we have to give them information. But it's not as simple as that. You can't just have this very simple one-way model, hence risk packs, top-down and bottom-up approach. Because the simple view really relies on this, what's called an information deficit model. It assumes that the the public, the citizens who are not perceiving a risk, apparently, not acting, are doing so because they don't get it, you know, and they need more information. But research going back decades and decades shows you can keep giving the information, but you still don't close that gap, and people don't necessarily act. So RiskPack is really trying to kickstart the communication process, to start with this understanding. So understanding of civil protection authorities, understanding the whole context, the diversity of citizens, and citizens also understanding how the civil protection authorities act, because they act under constraints as well. So beginning that process of understanding, of sharing the ideas, and importantly, building up relationships and relationships of trust, as we've heard several times, before we get to the building part of what tools and how to do the alerting.
Yeah, what you are stressing is it's also related to, I would say, a regular interactions among between citizens and civil protection. I saw, for example, in Portugal, in areas prone to wildfires, in schools, they are regularly discussing with firefighters, and they are brought to even fields to show exactly physically what may happen and what are there for them. So it's also back to education. Back to education at a very young age that we can facilitate, because, well, I have a question to you, another one, you know. It's start by how important, but I think that how important is for civil protection authorities to build relationship of trust with citizens in hazard location. But it's a question of not important, how can we do it?
Well, come back to us in 2 years' time, and we'll tell you.
Very good.
So,
okay.
RiskPack is trying to approach this through these co-creation labs, where we put civil protection authorities and citizen groups in the same room, so that they can try and work out where each side, if we think of it as a contest in that way, are coming from. You know, what are their positions? What are their constraints? It's not necessarily that people don't perceive a risk. It's just that they have a number of constraints, or they have other priorities, and if you haven't built up that trust, why would I trust you if I didn't know you? And yeah, so you've got to have the trust. Otherwise, people on both sides are really not going to act.
And in a way, you should also break the ice, because there are no stupid questions. There are no stupid questions, and sometimes people do not dare simply to pose questions because they do not know. And sometimes it creates a misunderstanding. So I think there is a lot of work to be done. Thank you very much, Maureen. I will now pass to Cor. So how will you share you are free. You are free. Maybe you pose yourself your question and you respond to it. This is the essence of moderating. Yeah.
Actually, I could fill the gap because I have a question, if you permit.
Very good. Thank you, Carsten.
Having noticed your project and the presentation in the beginning, what I find very fascinating with the corporate project is that you take the larger perspective. So your metrics are based partially on comparative analysis that you do, and also the transfer of knowledge from best practices to other communities. Now, in real life, we have this cultural diversity in Europe that makes it very difficult to compare and to move best practices from one case to another, which can be considered as rich, I suppose, but it's also like a challenge that we're all facing. So what particular challenges are you considering in your projects to overcome these cultural differences, particularly for the comparative analysis that you're planning on and the transfer of knowledge, while the acceptance of other methods from other countries? Sorry to have to surprise you with this question.
Yes, but as we said in the team, we have a multidisciplinary team, so we really want to approach all these challenges, considering the different aspects of social science, technology, also education, schools, how to interact with a different generation and with vulnerable people. So that will be a challenge for sure, but we'll have different activity to try to break the silo and to bring together this. So hopefully we'll do. We are really at the very start of the project, so we are in the study phase, analyzing things and trying to understand things, and then we will go to some action and some activity to bring this and to share the information. I don't know.
Just to add that we have 6 test cases in different European countries with different kind of episodes. And we can try to learn from these past cases how we can take into account your consideration.
Thank you very much. And I think it's very good that starting project like yours is indeed already being discussing, because you will see opportunities also regarding, for example, demonstration or exchange of expertise, and it is naturally occurring. You know, I'm very happy of that. For that, I see, well, the example of your participation is clearly a sign that it is coming naturally, this kind of synergy building, this exchange. So I'm very happy, because this is the essence of the community building. So thank you very much. And I will now turn back to the ResiLoc with an expert from the project, Samuel, who is advisor to ResiLoc. And I would like to have, there are 2 questions to you, Samuel. The first one, we know that to develop better strategies for disaster resilience on a qualitative and quantitative viewpoint, on the perception and behavior of diverse society are needed. We know about this, we have heard that this morning. But where do you see current challenges in new research on perception and behavior, and what can we do to address them? I have some slight idea about this, but you will tell us more about this.
Thank you, Philippe. I'm also representing the French National Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction on the top of ResiLoc. So perception and behavior, that's a huge problem, and it's been discussed a lot this morning. So we could keep it short and say, just look up, we are all doomed, so let's go grab lunch while we still can. But joke aside, I'll go in the same direction as Maureen. The knowledge perception gap has been discussed a lot this morning, and it's way too simplistic. Denial is a powerful coping mechanism. So we have a lot of unchallenged assumptions linked to people being irrational when they are, in fact, pretty rational. It's just that we don't understand their motivations, that maybe we need just to put more communication or to change the message, and people will behave the way we want, and people won't behave the way we want. When during an emergency we tell our parents not to go pick their kids at school, is it because they are stupid that they go pick their kids at school? No, it's because they love their kids. So maybe the main challenge is all those unchallenged expectations about rising awareness will lead to the desired action. It won't, and we have a lot of empirical knowledge about it. So maybe we have to shift the focus into understanding what people actually do instead of just trying to make them behave the way we want. But in that perspective, the knowledge we have is really fragmented. So among the way forwards, and I'm telling that to please Philippe, that way I will deserve my lunch. More coordination is needed. So what you are trying to build here, bringing the different projects, the different countries, to make sure that we move past that fragmented behavior to develop a more common approach and be able to build common ground in our understanding of perception and behavior.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you. I think, I fully take your point. I had some experience in showing that for example, we had the Xintia marine submersion some years ago, and my parents were flooded, and in the area where people knew had the memory of this kind of event, because this kind of events are not new. It has been presented as something quite exceptional, but the period of return is 80 years. We had one in 37, one in 1880, but people lost the memory, and even the indicators have been lost after the Second World War. In the 60s, where people close to La Rochelle built new houses, and people who did not know anything about this area came to live there. So the problem is a transmission of the disaster memory, but also I'm coming back to the education. People who are arriving to floodplain area should be told that this is a risky area, and we don't do that. We simply don't do that. So people are not prepared. In La Faute-sur-Mer, it was in 10 minutes the water was up to the roof, and people were absolutely not aware. So I think it's also a duty for us to imagine, because you speak about beliefs, this is clear, people do not believe, because it never happened. When it happens once, they will believe. They will. I can assure you that they will indeed keep that in their DNA. And in fact, if you are believing in transmission of this, the next generation will also have this in their DNA. So, well, this is an aparté. Ah, yes. Please, Yvonne, I was expecting your comment.
Yes, I have 3 short comments. The first one is that it was mentioned today about resilience concepts. The DRS7, there were 5 European projects mapping resilience concepts and so on, so that building that knowledge that exists. The second thing, doing links, there is a project addressing Japan, and it was a question of how to transfer knowledge and so on. I think the Engage project is looking into target aspects and contextual aspects, and also into Japan. So there are maybe some links that you can use and build each other on the experience that are already there. And now the last is the question for the panel. We have been talking about informing citizens and so on, but how you see citizens as a source of resilience, and how you are using that in your project. So not one way or learning what citizens are doing, but really engage them and use them as a source of resilience. So, and the answer is thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. This is a very wide and interesting question, which in fact I did not have in my fiche. So it's open to you. Please, who want to react to this question? I will pass you the microphone again, Samuel, because I have another question.
Thank you. I have the courage to start because I think where we have reached with our project quite towards the end. I think many of the projects have also mentioned these local resilience teams. We have the local vulnerability reflection teams as a new sort of concept that we propose, that in some countries these already exist, and in some regions they have been performing well and have really stepped into the crisis response very effectively. But I think this is definitely the resource to use to engage those vulnerable people, but also the individuals from very diverse society, for example, the large families, representatives, or you name it, basically. Because if we take a very situational and very dynamic perspective on vulnerabilities, then anyone can be vulnerable, and anyone should be represented in these vulnerability reflection teams or the resilience reflection teams. So I think and using the intermediaries that are available, that understand the societal diversity, for example, the social workers or social service representatives, as to bring together this diverse knowledge of local experiences and local problems in responding to crisis is a way to go as well, rather than trying to engage anyone, but we need to make wise use of the intermediaries.
Thank you, Cathy. I would like to maybe close this discussion by posing a last question to Samuel about in fact, what type of criteria, indices, or measurements can we use to address actually these issues of vulnerability and resilience? How can we measure this, and can we have criteria to enable decision to be taken?
Yeah, there is actually a mismatch between the rising development of indices and measurements of vulnerability and resilience and the understanding of their empirical validity. And this is a challenge because decision makers and policymakers are actually huge fans.
in a much more efficient way and anticipate the event before it occurs and evacuate people. And this is based
So we're at the dissemination phase of the project. So we actually have printed materials out in the hallway. We have some at the registration desk and then some to the right of the registration desk. We have summaries of our case studies, and we also have policy recommendations that have resulted from our project. So if you could just take a look at that, we worked really hard on them, so thank you.
Thank you. And if you are interested by borrowing commission staff working papers, there are some copies on the table. Thank you very much to all. It has been a very, very nice to moderate you. Thank you.
actually